And it looks like it's 10 a.m.
Oh,
doesn't it?
Back to work. Back to work.
Looks like we're ready to get this show on the road. I believe. Are we ready? Everybody at the home office there, headquarters.
We've got a quorum. So if you want to do a roll call to start us off, we get that started.
Let's do that. And I would like to welcome everyone to a wonderful, exciting, brand new year, 2026. The first official meeting of the year for BRAC. And I wanted to take a quick roll call, and let's see who all's here. We'll make it official. Mike, if you'd like to start.
And
Mike
before
Mangum.
Brian, I think your mic might be picking up some of the sound. It's echoing a little bit.
sometimes you just have to mute and then
Which one's picking up?
I think it might be Brian. And
Not me.
there we go. Let's see if that. Okay, that sounds a little bit better. Okay, great. Sorry about that.
All right.
Jamie can take roll call if you'd like her to.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure.
Jamie, thank you
So we
so much.
have, of course. So we have Todd. We have Brian. Marion. Rena.
Here.
Ashley. Larry. Marvin. Mike. Sam. Chance. And Leslie.
All right. Well, I guess we got to go right into, we're going to call this meeting to order. And let's go ahead and go into the election of officers. Now, as far as I know, we just need to, how do we do this exactly as far as the election goes? Do we just say,
Yeah, so for each position, you'll start with chair, you'll ask for nominations. If you get more than one nomination, then you can take a vote. If you only get one nomination, then you don't have to take a vote, it's approved by acclamation. You can nominate yourself, nominations don't need to be seconded. And then once we get the chair settled, we'll go to vice chair and then secretary.
makes sense? Okay, perfect. Okay, as far as chair goes, anybody like to nominate someone for chair?
You again.
All right. Thank you, sir. Anybody would like to second that?
Second.
All right. Anybody else like to throw their name in the hat? All right. Let's take a vote.
Well, you actually don't need to, if there's no
We
other
don't
nominations.
need to, okay, we don't need to take a vote, so we'll just move on right on to the vice chair position. Who'd like to put their name in for that? Anybody would like to nominate someone? Brian? I'd like to nominate Brian.
Second.
Anybody else like to put their name in for that position? All right. I guess that's where it'll be. Vice Chair Brian. And then Secretary.
I would nominate Marion.
Marion. I'll second that. Anybody else like to put their name in for secretary? All right, well then we are, as it stands, we'll move forward in 2026 as it stands with chair, vice chair, and secretary remaining the same. And let's get this show on the road and go through our agenda and make some things happen today. All right. Our first agenda item will be discussion and possible action to amend October 15th meeting there's no need to do anything on that. So we're just gonna click that as a check mark and we're done.
Is there any,
Number-
and just to check on that, if there's any changes, unless anyone else had any changes. Okay, just wanted to check.
Oh, okay, perfect. And then we need to go over number 4 agenda item would be actually our second agenda item, public comment, including any written public comment received on non-agenda items. Thank you for sharing, by the way.
So we have one written comment that we received prior to the meeting. And again, remember that any comments included in this agenda item are really just to discuss whether you want to include it on a future agenda item. We can't really discuss or deliberate the item unless it's like a clarifying question. On this one, just to take your temperature a little bit, it seems like this was largely resolved by the recent changes that originated here that became effective January 1st. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, it does look like that for sure. They're looking to get some experience moved over from out of state being a broker. And it looks like they would respectfully request consideration that Texas allow out-of-state broker experience and license history to count towards satisfying or reducing Texas broker education requirements, especially for applicants without a college degree. And I believe with the experience and things of that nature that we thankfully put into place, and thanks for the commissioners making sure that happened, I believe we've addressed this issue on our January 1st. Anyone else have any comments on this particular item? All right, well, really appreciate the public comment if you're watching, and
Hey, Ty.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
was kind of looking for a good spot to just mention this, and so I thought this might be a good time. I wanted to just,
Sure.
There's nothing on our agenda right that mentions Realm, the Realm portal. Because this group of people is connected to the real estate world so significantly, I wanted to just kind of give you a little bit of an update on where we are, and tell you thank you for your patience. We rolled out this new Realm portal middle of December. It did not go as planned or intended, and we remain in a holding pattern as it relates to many applicants. At the same time, we continue to make improvements, or I'm going to call them corrections at this point to the portal. Hopefully we move into just straight up improvements soon. But we are, what I would say, are inches away from being able to claim fixes for the 2 integrations that are keeping us from quickly processing applications. The integration with the DPS FBI system, and then also the integration with our exam provider that allows us to share with them information about who is authorized to take an exam. We are already receiving exam results from that exam provider, but on the front end, when someone is eligible to take an exam, there's additional integration that needs to happen there. I'm meeting with our vendor regularly, at least once a day. It used to be twice a day. We were together in person yesterday, and that progress is happening. I would call it progress that is not all that fun to brag about, because it's these internal incremental improvements. But what I'm ready for is progress that we can brag about, that we're humming along. We have a few steps between now and then, but I believe we're close. So I just wanted you to know that, and to also know that if there are people in your world who are losing their minds, that can't get through on the phone system, that need help in any particular way, to send them to me through email, to my email address, chelsea.buckholtz@trek.texas.gov. And sometimes I can help break those free. Other times I will say, here's what we're waiting on and what that wait might look like. It's my pleasure to help anybody who needs it. We will not stop until this system is functioning and functioning well, and then we will continue to make improvements to make it what it needs to be. So I want to thank you for your patience and send people my direction, and let me know if you need anything.
Thanks, Chelsea. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to Vanessa. Vanessa, are you in the room? I can't tell.
I am.
Hey,
What are you
Vanessa.
shouting at?
Well, I'm shouting in a very nice, sweet way, is what I'm doing.
Thank you.
So I wanted to say thank you for your assistance on a couple of things that came up, and you really got on it, and we really appreciate it. And honestly, just great, seriously great work, and really appreciate you. Thank you so much for doing that.
Oh gosh, Ty, thank you. It's a delight when I can help someone.
No, it's great. So it was a real doozy, and I really appreciate you helping out. So it meant a lot.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I could also just add a thanks to Chelsea and staff for their patience, persistence, accessibility, and communication, because they have been very, very helpful and supportive as we've had questions, and several people from our team have reached out to Trek. And anytime you move a database of 200,000 plus licensees, there are going to be challenges. And I think this is just a process that we're going to have to work through, and look forward to the great functionality ahead. But again, staff, thank you so much for staying the course and being accessible to us.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. Thanks, Marma. Okay, Abby, sorry for the diversion.
No. Okay.
Thanks for the update, Chelsea. Really appreciate it. Okay, and I don't envy what you guys are going through over there. So I know it's a lot of work, but we appreciate you. All right, so let me see here. Amber, are you wanting to present something else here for agenda item number 5?
I think this is just for agenda item 5. This has to do with the transaction coordinator showing services open house hosted by a different brokerage agenda item. And this was just an article that we recently published that we thought would be helpful for this discussion. So included it in the materials.
For sure. And I think for agenda item number 5, if everyone, I hope, has had a chance to take a look at it, this issue seems to be coming up. I've been seeing a lot of discussion online about it. In fact, there's been some discussion in our office about other agents doing open houses and things of this nature. And I believe we brought up some of the other items. We talked about this prior, but open houses, as far as the buyer representation, all kinds of different things. I think this is a very good discussion for all of us to have. And if there's anything we need to address or talk about or clarify, and honestly, the communication on this has been pretty good too. So any feedback anybody would like to share, I know that we've all got our 20 days in or what have you now. What is it, the 21st, 22nd? We're in to this year quite a bit with the new change, and I think it's really well worth talking about. So any feedback that someone would like to share, I would greatly appreciate it. And kind of talk about this issue with the open houses, because that seems to be one of the biggest ones right now. If everyone,
yeah, Ty, I think it's just going to be an education process, because people don't understand the complexity that is now involved, and it's, by the way, it's healthy. It's healthy, and it is necessary, but it's going to be an education and communication process around these items that'll be ongoing.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And we're just beginning this. I'm sure everyone's seeing different things and hearing different things. In fact, I'm hearing a lot of folks out there, and I'm just saying in general, in general speaking, I'm seeing a lot of folks don't understand exactly that they're having to do things different if they're doing open houses for another broker, and that education is really needed. I think it needs to be continually given right now.
So Ty, if I could just jump in for 2 seconds and
Yes, sir. Chance, how are you? Happy
Good,
New
man.
Year.
Happy New Year to you, brother. And I'll lower my hand here. Anyway, I am seeing a lot of you have to have a buyer's rep in order to show somebody, or you have a buyer's rep in different internet groups, and combating it the best that I can. But just so everybody in this group knows that the way that this is being taught in instructor training for Legal 1 and Legal 2 is that if you're hosting an open house for another broker, every single person that walks through that door has to sign the showing form. So just for clarification from an education standpoint, that is how Avis and Chairman George are putting that out to the instructors for this class in their certifications.
I think
And
that's great.
IABS. Don't forget the IABS part of that too.
And that is also in that article as well.
That's definitely a hurdle that someone would have to jump through if they're doing an open house for another brokerage. Are you, Chance, I know you've got a good presence down there in Houston. Are you seeing a lot of agents wanting to still do open houses for your properties that you've got listed down there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that trend has changed at all, but I think that education is good. And as far as a broker is concerned, if you're a broker and you're allowing another agent from another brokerage to do the open houses for your properties, wouldn't you think it'd be a good idea to make sure that they understood the rules and regulations on what they're supposed to do, just for a liability's sake as well? I think clarifying that as well would be a good idea. But this is a great article. Anybody else have any feedback on this for open houses, for specifically? Bob?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I can't see who it is. Sorry, it's a little loud too. Somebody's got something going on in the background.
It's me.
Oh, there we go.
One thing I think would be great on this, because the write-up is so good, it's so granular. However, realtors do not read, which means to sit there and really, and sometimes brokers, but I think a video coming from Trek or coming from someone, kind of like we did on the IABS, the different scenarios, I think that would be so amazing to put out on a YouTube video, so that realtors and brokers now can see different scenarios. For example, you're at an open house, someone walks through the door, they're not your client, they're not, presenting them with IBS, because it's happening so much where other agents are working for other brokers, and even in classes, they don't attend Legal 1 and 2 and broker responsibilities frequently enough to get the change, because most people wait till the very end of when their CE is due. Now they've been 2 years not knowing anything that's going on in the industry. So, I think if you could do something like that, that would be amazing. It keeps it in real time. And if they type in something that says, open houses, then that Trek video is going to trend up pretty highly. But I do think we need to get something out there, because it is a new change. It's not technically in any of the content, you know what I mean, that we're teaching now. So we do need something around that to put out there in the waves?
Thanks for that, Marianne. This is Summer Mandel. We actually are trying to get John George to do a video with us. He unfortunately got ill after 2 days of BLC, so that's when we were going to do some stuff with him. So that got put on the back burner. But I like your suggestion too of making it similar to that IABS video. I know a lot of people like how that was done. So I'll pass that along to Sierra and see what we can put together.
Thank you.
I think that's a really good idea. Very good idea. Go ahead, Bob.
I would be interested, since Marvin is in my market, Collin County in Dallas, and your experience in Fort Worth. In Collin County, the vast majority of the brokers I do business with will not allow their agents to do open houses at other brokerages. We have, because of the new changes, especially sub-agency and everything, we've totally eliminated that as a broker policy. And most of the other brokers, as we experience this, are down that same road. But I'm hearing in Houston that that's pretty prevalent, that people are doing different brokerages, open houses. Is that what you're seeing, Chance?
I'm seeing that, and I'm
Yes,
also
ma'am.
seeing consumers getting taken advantage of by people charging to show them a house. I've gotten several emails about that, people making a business out of just showing. And then also, this happened to me last week. I had a client, I was at a conference, I had a client that wanted to see a house, and he called the listing agent. The listing agent says you have to sign a property specific agreement. So he sends that to me, and I write her back and I said, what's a property specific agreement? And she goes on to tell me they have to sign a buyer's representation agreement. I said, no, they absolutely don't. And about 4 emails later, she still didn't understand why, but she tried to justify if they were going to show their listing, they had to be compensated and they had to have a buyer's rep agreement. So it's going nuts around here.
And
Yeah,
Ty,
I've heard a lot of the buyer's rep stuff, but I haven't heard, that's new for on the compensation piece. That's interesting. But the buyer's rep thing is all over the place.
Yep.
So Leslie, just to clarify, you're hearing that to show their own listing, they're wanting compensation?
No, to show any listing.
Okay,
They
got
want
it. Okay.
to sign a showing agreement. They want X amount of $100, whatever it may be,
Got it.
just to show a listing. But on the other case, and when this woman wanted the buyer's rep agreement signed, I reached out to the supervisor to say, I think you need to train your agent if this isn't right. The consumer's getting taken advantage of. No response.
Yeah. That's
Raina had a
interesting.
comment.
Oh, go ahead.
The other thing to consider is the insurance piece. You're not covered as an agent showing another broker's property under the E&O policy. You have to have additional insurance as a business, a party in business to be able to be covered for that's, and that's a main reason why brokers put it in their policies not to do open houses at other brokers. Do people do them? Yeah. But are you covered in the event of an incident? No.
For sure. That's exactly that point on this E&O insurance. They're not wanting to do it, so it's not a smart move, quite frankly. Marvin, you have your hand
Yes,
up.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So Bob, in response to your question, you're correct in terms of brokers that are informed. The informed brokers are not allowing it. And then the brokers who are not allowing it, that are informed about their agent's activity, all good. But there's a lot of just agent at company A reaching out to agent at company B, doing open houses, and then it happens without the broker's knowledge.
Yeah.
Bob, anything on that?
No, he's absolutely right. One of our greatest challenges as a broker is we have agents who in spite of the training, in spite of what's in our policy procedures manual, they go do their thing. And as we know, we've got responsibility as a broker to try to rein in these loose cannons, and that's hard to do. It's that herding cats challenge. And all you can do is train and train and train. And you got your brokers in your policy procedures manual. I mean, we've had to update our policy procedures manual with all these rule changes, as I'm sure everybody else has. So, you can only do so much, and hopefully, TREC will continue to follow the principle of enforcement through education. And when something happens and we've done everything we can as a broker, there's some leeway there. Say, you know what? You are responsible for all your agents, but it does appear like you've done what you need to do. So we're going to work with you on this. And that's a hope, because it's a battle every day. I mean, some of my best agents will go out and do something. I mean, the thing that Leslie brought up, I can't imagine a listing agent making a buyer move into an intermediate relationship. Is broker going to do appointments or not do appointments under the new rules? I don't know how they even do that. I mean, that's just crazy. But there's a lot of that crazy going on out there, which is why NAR has come up with a new designation, and it's a real estate therapy designation, because we all need to be in therapy if we're in real estate.
Funny. So
I do have one thing.
I think one thing we've got to talk about here is we've talked about the open houses, we've talked about this, but the showing services, I mean, it's, I've read some people saying that the showing services create a sub-agency, and we no longer have a sub-agency. I've heard all kinds of different things, but I think we need to talk about the showing services, and I think we need to talk about transaction coordination. As far as the transaction coordinators go, if they're working outside of your brokerage and you're sharing information with that transaction coordinator, yes, they may be licensed, but they're under the supervision of a different broker. I don't know, but to me, it seems like a recipe for disaster. And I don't know that I thought we couldn't have someone working for two different brokerages or two different brokers in this scenario. So I feel like that this is something we need to talk about as far as that goes. And then the showing services, this should change the game on the showing services as well, considering the representation agreements and IABS, obviously. But I think these are two topics we need to discuss. Marion has her hand up first, and then Bob, if you'd like to chime in on that piece as well, I'll come back to you, sir.
I would like to see us add this whole topic around the open houses on our agenda to at least be able to, kind of flesh it out a little bit more, and maybe even give some guidelines over to ESAC or whatever. But I would like to see that on our agenda if we could, to really kind of chat a little bit about that, even if it's for one meeting.
And it is on our agenda right now.
That's exactly what I was saying. Is that like we have it on here to discuss, because
Okay,
I feel
so
like
we can talk. We're discussing. Okay, that sounds good.
What I want to do, Marion, is I feel like that it's something we need to discuss, especially since this whole thing is changing right now. I mean, we just went through this transition, and I feel like if we're going to address it, we need to really start putting our finger on the pulse of what's going on, and if there's something that needs to be done or something that needs to happen or education that needs to be had. I like the video idea. I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think that really needs to happen, and I think that's an education piece. But is there anything else? Because we're the eyes and ears out there. Is there anything else on the open house piece that you'd like to kind of specifically go over, maybe, or in regards to transaction coordination or the showing services? I feel like those are also very important topics.
No, I think again, the video we've spent a lot of time talking about the open houses, which is a good thing. And we've seen a lot of different scenarios of what's going on out in the industry, from Leslie's to Chance's feedback to brokers who are not even, who've written policies around it. So I think as a committee, our duty should be to just try to get something out there as quickly as possible from an educational perspective to just guide and gird everybody on what they can or cannot do. Because without it, it's only going to get worse because it's new. And most of the people don't even know that it's changed, so,
Right.
that's really, all I have to add there.
No, that makes sense. I think we just put our thinking caps on. If it needs to come up for the next agenda, we can bring it up again, but that's why I think it was important to have it on this one. Bob, did you have something to add on the showing services or anything, sir?
Yeah, and maybe this, I don't know if we passed up the transaction coordinator issue. We're gonna still talk about that, or?
Yeah, no, this is all one topic right here.
Okay, and so, again, and we mentioned this earlier, what Trek did with this great little article in the Q&A was excellent. I mean, it really answered a lot of questions that's helped us in our training for our agents. This was great. I'm still not clear, though, on a couple of points. One on open houses for another broker, and it talks about you have to have that written agreement. And if they won't do that written agreement, they can't see the house, kind of thing. I'm not sure, since sub-agent was removed, when I've got an agent at another broker's open house, I'm not sure who represents whom here. I'm not clear on that, and I think maybe Abby or as Chelsea say, okay, Bob, you missed that whole paragraph. Here's what it is.
Well, Bob, I think on where I'm going to add something to that is, if you're doing an open house and you're not working with the same broker, you're doing an open house and you're putting up open house signage. Let's just say it's open house signage that has a brand on it, XYZ brand, and your ABC, and they're putting up open house signage for their brokerage name in the yard. They're putting up signs, and they've gotten permission from neighbors to put up signs in their yard to show where the house is, and things like that. But it's branded a different brand brokerage. You have flags flying in the yard that are a different brand brokerage. To me, that seems like an advertising violation. But I'm going to throw that on top of what Bob was just talking about.
And I'll just clarify one thing. So sub-agency was eliminated from the License Act, but the legal concept of sub-agency is not necessarily gone. There still could be instances, albeit I think more limited instances, where sub-agency could exist. I think those would be complicated situations and something you would want to talk to, agents talk to their brokers, if they have questions, talk to their attorney. But it still can exist. It's just not mentioned in our License Act anymore. So I do want to clarify that little piece.
And I wanted to add something too. You still have, different listing agreements for lease and for sale. So you could potentially have two brokers on that property, one listing it for sale and one listing it for lease. So I don't think it's any less complicated, the way that can happen. So.
Okay, so a follow-up clarification. If you do not represent the seller, you have to have any buyer sign a written agreement before seeing the property. Is that correct?
Are we talking about the open house situation?
Anything where you've got an agent and they're showing an unrepresented buyer property, and it's a property that the agent does not represent the seller, they have to have that unrepresented buyer sign a written agreement. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's that written agreement requirement, right?
So that would include open houses, correct?
Right. So that's what we're talking about in that situation where you are not a part of the listing broker's firm, you are from another brokerage, then that would trigger, in an open house situation, that would trigger the situation where you're having a written agreement, also providing the IBS. This is, of course, assuming there's not sub-agency going on, which is a whole other can of worms, but I think in a lot of cases, that's not what's going to be happening.
Okay, so the seller and the listing agent allowing an agent with another brokerage to hold one of their houses open, there'll be a lot of education needed So the seller says, okay, so you're saying not just anyone can walk into my house and see it. They've got to sign some agreement. I mean, how's that going to inhibit the whole open house process? Needs to be some real education going on there, in spite of all the detail issues that we've got on agency and E&O and all the rest of it. They've got to know that's the case. It just seems like this whole thing is such a can of worms. But in the article, in the Q&A that Trek has in here, I mean, it does, if I understood it, say if you've got somebody and you're showing a property that's not one of your properties, your office property, you got to have a written agreement or you can't show them the property. And that includes open houses across the board, which to me is that's a pretty black and white kind of thing. I mean, that's the rule and that's what it is. And it's going to take the agents to understand, this is not a Bob Baker rule. This is a Trek rule. This is the law. And if you can't do that, then you can't show that house. And if you're not okay with that, here's the name of a broker I don't like. Why don't you move over to them and solve everybody's problem? So.
And I think are certainly all in agreement. This is definitely something we need to educate on. We have been, but we need to continue to do it, and certainly in as many ways that we can do it. We definitely hear you. This is good feedback.
I wanted to
Thank
add something, something that was brought to my attention. Okay, what if you have, a luxury property and that listing broker, and this happened in an instance that was brought to my attention. The listing broker wanted to expand the exposure of the property, allows another agent to sit it open with them. What do you do in the scenario where both are there, two different brokers to bring a larger audience, right? What happens in that scenario? And the listing agent's actually there, present.
Well, I think that if it were me, I would be taking point being the listing agent on that. And then the person who's there to increase exposure, they would be secondary. So that would make the most sense and make it the easiest path to being able to discuss the real estate itself and the transaction if there's one that needed to be had. And then the back end stuff would be essentially they would be like an assistant there. But I would take point on that. But I think that could be clarified as well. I mean, there's going to be a lot of different scenarios where we're going to run into agents and other brokers wanting to do open houses, and there's going to be different complex things. I think it boils down to a couple of different things: advertising, disclosure, and your formalities where you have to have documents signed to make sure that you as a broker and you as an agent need to keep your nose clean and make sure that you're doing things by the book, and doing somebody else's open houses may not be your best way to do it. I think that's just bottom line. Stick within your brokerage. I think that's where this really leads to. Mike had his hand up for a long time. Mike, I want you to be able to talk and give us your wise input.
I'm not sure you want to ask me yet because everybody's talking about sales, but somebody mentioned properties that were for sale and for lease, and we're running into this a ton. I've got active listings right now that another agent has for lease, but we're going to be processing the lease and doing the background check and all that kind of stuff for anybody that they've got. If they do that, they've also got that property for sale. So a lot of people are saying that a lot of these rules don't apply to a lease, but when you're getting into a situation like this, I'm getting agents that go, we don't know if we're supposed to sign anything or not. And we're hearing that, in most of the publications I'm seeing coming from Trek and from Texas Realtors, there's just one line and says this doesn't apply to leases. But in a lot of these different scenarios, I'm seeing a lot of this confusion. And quite frankly, a ton of leasing agents for years told me, I don't sign anything. It's only a lease. Nobody cares. And now we're going, that may not be the case anymore. So I think if we're going to do videos or we're going to do whatever we do, we're going to have to say more than one line to say this doesn't apply to leases, because I think in some of these circumstances it might. So because a lot of those leases turn into sales. So
Yes.
That's good feedback. To clarify that, written agreement requirement does not apply to leases. It applies to residential buyers, but that's a good point to make that we can certainly stress that.
Mr.
Very good
Chairman,
point,
might
Mike. Yes, sir.
I suggest that um, this topic be sent to whoever the writing group is going to be for the new broker responsibility for 2027. I know we've talked about transaction coordinators and showing agents in the past for that class, but this sure seems like it's a pertinent subject moving into a class writing season.
Oh, I 100% agree with you, Chance. That does make sense.
And you've got
I'm
you've
here.
got Jen and Vanessa in here listening, so.
Okay. Have we formed this writing group yet?
It's me. I'm here.
Okay, very good. Vanessa, sounds good.
I want to add something. Rena, you had mentioned leasing and also a sales agent, both. I'm hearing more and more lately of co-brokering. Some of these larger companies, nationwide companies, have a local agent co-brokering with them. So we also have to be cognizant of that.
I think that's a very, very good point, Leslie. And I don't think we've seen a lot of co-brokering in the past. And I think this could open up the door to that, actually.
Yeah, we don't have any rules against co-brokering. So
Right.
you can have two brokerages on one listing.
Right. Could be a non-exclusive.
Mhm.
All right. Well, that's good. Now, what about this showing service? Now, we've talked about this over the last, I don't know, as far as I can remember, 2020, all the way back to, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, we talked about showing services. We've talked about different things. As far as the showing service stuff goes, it's kind of been a little bit hands off, quite frankly. But I don't know. I think this representation, the deal with the representation really does change the game a little bit on this. And then as far as payment goes, that obviously has continually been a topic of, I guess, contention, because it's, payment's supposed to go through a broker, and then once the payment goes through the broker, then it goes to the agent, obviously, or that's the way it's supposed to go. On a showing service, it's my understanding that the payment goes directly to the agent, and I guess it's okay if the broker knows about it, but it's all about a disclosure, I guess. But as far as this goes, on the showing service, there is a lot of talk about these showing services and people that they use them, and they're concerned about getting into trouble. They're concerned about a lot of different things. If they're participating in these showing services, are they subject to possible penalties and issues? That is something that is a topic, and it's definitely being talked about out there. So we've all had tons of communication, tons of talking about this stuff. Does anyone else have some feedback or some thoughts on this? Maybe some ideas on a disclosure, whatever it is, think outside the box. If there's something that needs to be done, let's discuss it. But it definitely is something that keeps coming up.
To me,
At Arello, they discussed it. It is considered a sub-agency.
well, and it's compensation. Like you're being compensated for something that you can do as a licensed professional. I mean, I've seen it be considered compensation and needs to be run through the broker.
So would essentially someone have to file a complaint in order for this to come up? If a broker found out somebody was receiving compensation not through them, it doesn't matter the amount, the dollar amount. Am I correct? Isn't it any dollar amount?
Yeah, so we've certainly got rules that say, compensation has to flow through the broker unless the broker is given permission otherwise. So if there's a a violation of that rule, just like anything, that a complaint could be filed. Brokers are also in the position where they have agreements with their sales agents. So that can also be handled in the brokerage as well. But for track purposes, what our hat is, if there's a violation of a rule, there's a violation of a rule, file a complaint.
Got it. So, rule of thumb, if you're a broker and you've got showing service folks out there, you might want to make a policy on it. And if you don't have a policy on it, you should do one. And if it's being violated and something needs to happen, file a complaint. And it looks like it would be a clear violation based on what I can tell if things are not being done on the up and up. Any other discussion on this showing service? Oh, Bob, go ahead, sir. I see your
Okay,
hand
so
there.
you may have just addressed it, Ty, but clarify for me that if a broker's agents are using a showing service, the broker has to be in some agreement with the showing service, and 1101.562 and 563 apply to the agents doing these showings. That just because they're doing it through a third party doesn't eliminate the requirement for the showing without representation and the written agreement requirement. Is that correct on that?
That's correct, Bob.
Okay. I don't think the showing services know that, especially the out-of-state showing services.
All right. Well, I think that makes sense. Does anybody else have any comments? It looks like I can't tell who's raising their hand on here. If anybody else can tell me who that is.
Marvin.
Yep.
Marvin.
That's hi, it's
Go ahead,
Marvin.
sir.
So similar to the previous topic, I think this is a great option for the writing group for broker responsibility to take up, because sponsoring broker needs to have a policy about this to authorize it. And they also need to have a plan for authorizing compensation. So there's the activity and the compensation, both which need to be authorized. And I think it's a good writing topic.
Very good point, Marvin. All right. As far as the showing services go and the topic on open houses, I think as we get further down the road and we see more things that are happening, I think it will come back up in the future. But as far as I can tell right now, there's no action that we need to discuss except for an educational piece and a video, which would be really nice. And it looks like Summer's already got that rolling. So thank you, Summer. All right, let's go to, if there's nothing else to be.
Before we move
Yes.
forward, I do have one quick question on transaction
Absolutely.
coordination. With transaction coordination, was there any rule that says your transaction coordinator can't be out of the country? So they don't care where they are and what they do. Okay.
No.
Well, they care what they do. They do care what they do.
Just not where they are.
So if it's a licensed activity, so if they're supposed to be licensed doing that activity, then that would be a violation. If they're just doing basic things, then it may not be a violation.
Okay.
However, this is my point on it, is if we're sharing customer information, client information, and it's going outside of your brokerage, going outside of your control, I can see that being a real issue. And that's my biggest problem there, especially if it's a competing broker that maybe you find yourself in a deal with. I feel like that would also be an issue. So I don't know how that needs to be handled, but the fact is I think it comes up more often than we may think. Marion, did you have something else?
No.
Okay.
But Bob had his hand.
Yes, I think we need to continue talking about this transaction coordinator. I know in our last meeting we discussed if you're going to be a transaction coordinator and you're licensed, you can only work for your brokerage. If you're not licensed, then you're able to do other TC jobs. But in other states, they do not allow what we're doing. I mean, it's a confidentiality agreement, or it's confidentiality. Nobody knows who's working for who. This one person jumps in at the end or after you've signed a contract. If one person works for, if the TC works for one brokerage and the other brokerage is doing the job, what happens when that terminates and that other TC brokerage may know what had gone on and, hey, let's just offer this on this listing because this is what this contract said. I mean, it's just too many issues that do not protect the consumer.
I 100% agree. But I don't know what we can do about it. Marvin, did you want to say something on that?
Yes. So I think an important distinction here is this transaction coordinator conducting licensed activity or unlicensed activity? If it's unlicensed activity, it's really not that big of a deal if they're doing clerical work for a different broker. If they're doing
the confidentiality
negotiation,
part, Marvin.
but we don't regulate. I don't think TREC regulates unlicensed people or people who are doing activities that are not licensed activities. We regulate licensees or people who are doing licensed activity who are unlicensed, but I don't think we can regulate people who are unlicensed doing unlicensed activity.
Right. I'm sorry. I thought you said if they're licensed and doing it, and they're not doing tasks that you don't have to have a license for. But even if you are licensed and doing tasks that you are doesn't need a license, there's still a confidentiality issue.
Up for discussion, in my opinion.
Bob, I see you raising your hand, sir.
Okay. Good points here. And the distinction is between licensed and unlicensed on the TC. But even on the admin TC issue that they're not providing a brokerage activity, when we hear confidentiality, what I think of is the broker's privacy policy. And the broker has to have a privacy policy where they've got that information, and an unlicensed TC can have that same information that the broker is responsible in their privacy policy to protect and advise. Here's how we control it. Here's who has access to it. Here's how we dispose of it. I think it, and we've got several teams, and the common place where they seem to be using a lot of out-of-country TCs is the Philippines. And they evidently do a great job in spite of the time difference and work through that. But we've got to make sure that they understand our privacy policy and how the information has to be protected, disposed of, go through the process. Even on unlicensed activity, I think the broker has significant liability for that, especially in the example given earlier when you've got two brokers, different companies dealing with this privacy information. That can get into a violation pretty quickly, I would think. So we'd have to be very careful. And I think that part of this is an education and making the distinction between licensed activities. A TC who's licensed, can they also do unlicensed activity for another broker? Or do they can only, if they're doing licensed activity, they can only do that for their sponsoring broker? How does that make? And I think that's a distinction we need to make. And the powers that be say, okay, here are the rules on that, and here's how we educate it. Because a set of rules for the people out there doing this is really valuable, because like some of the other things we talk about, there's a huge range of what's going on out there. And not only are the brokers having some responsibility, this is a challenge for the consumer, that things are happening to the consumer and information getting out there that they don't know who in the heck has it. And I think that's a huge risk.
And I think to add to that is, I think a lot of this is how the TCs are paid per transaction. You know, the agents and team leaders who have a dedicated transaction coordinator have less of a problem than the ones that are shared, right? So I think being, you know, whether you're an employee versus just being paid per transaction, I think a lot of this stems from how they're paid and the risk that opens the can of worms. Just like our agents who are independent contractors, they have all these broker rules to follow. But at the end of the day, when their money comes in, it's their money. There's no arguing with them. They want their money as quickly as possible. And what can we do to make that happen for them, right? Because it belongs to them. And it's this same push-pull, and I like to call, basically in our position, we have a big responsibility in managing dysfunction is what it comes down to, because they're out there doing what we don't even know what they're doing, right? But we have all these rules in place. We don't know if they're following the rules, and it's not until something comes up that we know about it. And that's, thank God for our committee to even look at these things, because, there's just a lot we don't know happening.
Well, there's a very good point here. And as far as the payment goes, if there's a payment made, if I'm not incorrect, and I've got a lot of people on here that probably know more than I do as far as this goes, but as far as a payment that would be paid out on a CDA, commission disbursement authorization from a broker, and that would go to the title company or what have you. If it's paid out due to a transaction closing, wouldn't that be a real estate activity? And they would need to be licensed, otherwise it would be a violation. Somebody would be getting paid for a closing. Am I not incorrect?
So this really comes down to what, and we've said it before, but what that individual is doing. Are they doing unlicensed activity? Are they doing licensed activity? Obviously, we can't control the unlicensed activity, payment structures for that. We can't control payment structures for licensed activity. That's outside our scope. But it really comes down to, what is this individual doing?
Yeah. I was kind of joking with somebody the other day that transaction coordination is the new property management. Once upon a time when the market would slow down, everybody would all of a sudden become a property manager so they could make a little extra money. And now today, the market slows down and everybody becomes a transaction coordinator so they can make a little extra money.
It's actually a really funny analogy, but it's true. It's really true. All right. Well, I think this is good discussion.
Ty,
There's a lot going on online with it. Yes, ma'am.
I think Mike has a question, and then I have a question as well.
Okay, Mike, let's go for it, sir.
Yeah, tying this back again to my side of the aisle, what Chan said is true. We're seeing lots of people saying, okay, now I can be a property manager. But what Leslie said earlier, some of the forms that we've updated lately give the agent that is doing the showing, or whatever you want to call them, the right to get money. And we teach that in class all the time. If you're signing a listing agreement, put some damn money on it, because a lot of people don't do it on the buyer side. And we said they always depend on, they've always depended on the seller before. And so we're saying you need to put some money on it. And these showing forms that we're having, people are doing that. People are starting to put money on it. And then they're also deciding that because of that, they're a property manager and they're running the credit, because all of our different MLSs are now having that embedded in our system. And you've got people running credit that have no authority to do that. And they've got all these people's credits, and you wouldn't believe if I tell you some of the people that just email somebody's credit report to me. And I'm going, you can't do that. You don't have the authority to do that. So I don't know how many of these people are making complaints to Trek on this, but it's becoming worse and worse as we go on. People are just saying that, well, the board gives it to me as part of my MLS now, so that gives me the authority to run it. And I said, no, it doesn't. It gives your client the authority to run it. There's nothing in a listing agreement that says you can run a credit report and
Right.
charge for it. And they're doing
Yeah.
it. And by, tons of them are doing it. So that whole thing on the education needs to be, if we're going to do these types of rules, that's got to be involved, because people are doing it right and left. And that's federal. That's not even the state rule. Those are federal rules.
Right.
So,
Good point, Mike.
So
Leslie?
I had a situation just yesterday, actually. I'm a buyer's agent, and then there's a listing agent, and then everything got signed and executed, and all of a sudden there's a TC. that's licensed and not with that brokerage of the listing agent. So my question in my head was, so do I have to disclose all this, that somebody else that's licensed just popped into this transaction all of a sudden is the only person that we're having any communication with? Or, I mean, what are the disclosure rules on that? I don't want to be held liable for somebody else jumping in that I had no clue was there.
Well, so, and I'm assuming then that it's not you that's using this TC, it's the listing broker. You know, I think that'd be really fact specific, as to what, you know, the requirement would be in that situation.
Educating.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we can always say file a complaint, but at the end of the day, we're educating all day long, and we have to continue to educate and know the rules ourselves as best we can and share the information, you know.
Right. But our
Yeah.
job is to protect the consumer. Are we protecting the consumer by allowing this practice? So do we as a group, as BRAC, want to modify or try to modify the rules we have to better protect the consumer? That's the end question.
Or a disclosure is what you're saying.
That, or if you are licensed, you work for your brokerage and you work for your brokerage only. If you're not licensed, then you're welcome to do that. But there always needs to be a disclosure regardless.
I think a disclosure would probably be a great idea. I think it's a great idea. I think that's where it would start, I think. And yeah, I think it's.
But we still go back to the question, as a group, would you like to explore the possibility of you work for your brokerage only, which would solve all these problems that we're talking about right now? Then you know where the money is going, you know who everybody works for, you're not worried about the confidentiality as much. That's the question of how do you want to move forward?
I mean, I think that's a valid point. As far as I know, that's the way it is. Or that's the way it's supposed to be. You're working with one broker and you're getting paid through one broker.
And having a policy and procedure on it, so that educating brokers to have a policy and procedure on it, because there's a lot of ways to handle something, and some brokers are more lenient than others, some are smaller than others, some, you know, the bigger you are, the bigger target you are, so you need to have harder rules. Like I think handling it just one way, I don't know. There are so many other things that are the same way, where they're handled in policies and procedures, whether or not there needs to be a committee rule on it, you know, to protect the consumer from an industry perspective. I don't know.
And I'll just.
We have rules in place. If you are licensed and sponsored by an agent, you work only for that agent. I mean, that broker, sorry.
And I can jump in here too. This is something that we did have a working group made up of some commissioners. I believe Marvin was on this as well. Take a look at this issue. So this has been looked at, and the recommendation from that group, because of the variations in which this can appear, was, okay, yes, there's a statute that says, you know, you're sponsored by a broker, you're working for that sponsoring broker. And so the kind of resolution of that conversation was, well, okay, that is true, even if your broker gives you authorization to work for another brokerage. So it's not quite as black and white as that. There was a little bit of nuance based on the feedback from the working group. This group is welcome to make a recommendation, you know, as always, to the commission to look at that issue again. But I just did want to provide you with that background.
I think times have changed now with all of these NAR things in place and showing agreements. I think we've come to the Wild Wild West and people getting taken advantage of, and we need to focus on protecting the consumer. I know this has been a discussion at many of the Arello conferences as well. when I mentioned that our TCs could work for any brokerage, people were shocked. And that's people from all over the US. So it's up to you what you want to do. I just think that we need to make sure that we're protecting the consumer.
Marvin?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the discussion in the previous group that looked at this 2 or 3 years ago was that there are some potential unintended consequences. For example, in my company, we do not allow anything outside the brokerage for open houses, buyer showings, transaction coordinations. We don't allow anything outside to happen. However, there are some very, very sharp people who are solo brokers or a broker with 1 or 2 agents. They may want to engage the services of a transaction coordinator who is sponsored by a different broker, and with proper authorization, proper documentation, proper policy on both sides, there may be a place for that. Also, back to the conversation about, is that transaction coordinator conducting license activities or clerical only? If they're conducting clerical only, very simple. If they're conducting licensed activities, that becomes more complicated, and that is very, very risky, very challenging. I think this is again, a writing topic for broker responsibility. But I'm okay leaving it as it is, as long as we fully educate the broker and agent community on this issue.
Did somebody else have their hand up a second ago? All right. I think we're kind of at that point where, do we want to educate people and say, hey, if you're doing brokerage activity and you are being a transaction coordinator, you need to do it with only one broker, the same broker, essentially. And if you're just doing clerical work, how is that defined? Maybe another education piece out there. In my opinion, it's pretty cut and dry. If you're doing real estate activities with another broker and you're working for another broker, you shouldn't be doing it. And I think Marvin has a good point. If they're doing clerical work, then fine. There's a bunch of that going on as well. But I think there's a clear line, or at least it should be a clear line on whether you're doing brokerage activity or not. Now, whether they're being honest about it is a different story. Marianne?
I think you just hit on it, but where it becomes an issue is when they decide they want to be a transaction coordinator, they don't go to TREC and say, hey, I'm going to use my license from a transaction coordinator perspective. All we do is we get with our local associations and we have them to set them up to have access to MLS and all of those different things. So the reason it is the wild, wild west is because there's no oversight to it. And I like Leslie's perspective in that if it's written and it's clear, the only person that transaction coordinator can work for is their brokerage if they're licensed. That makes it easy because, see, it doesn't stop that licensee from going over to Utah. And you may know their license, so to speak, but setting them up on a licensed side and it's a very convoluted process, but it's very easily done. But there's no oversight, which means that those people can bounce from brokerage to brokerage. And I think it was Marvin talked about if their documentation is elaborate enough, they can make it happen. I went through a transaction coordinator certification just to get an idea of what is behind the scenes of all of this. And the training is extensive. They teach you how to set up a business process behind all of this, both license and license activity, and they set up a business doing transaction coordination. Now, where the problem runs into is privacy. And I just had this happen where someone made the comment, well, I can see both sides. So guess what? I'm just going to do this on my offer or this on my contract. You see what I mean? Because they had access to both sides of the fence. So one, I think it when it comes to the broker responsibility writing group, really writing what that privacy policy should look like from a brokerage perspective, but also TREC's expectation of a privacy policy. Because in that same situation, I had someone give me a snapshot of the forewarn of the client to tell me that there was liens. That's a privacy issue. So, and that person was also a licensed transaction coordinator who was trying to go above and beyond. However, you've got the privacy issue as well as now you are sharing information that is from two different brokerages. And because there's nothing that give them any compliance or rules, there's nothing wrong with them doing it. And the better they get with this, the more they'll use it to their advantage to get more and more brokers up under their business as a transaction coordinator. Okay. And again, Texas is one of the I haven't found any other states that allow TCs to kind of do what we do, but we do need to kind of get a handle on it and put some rules around it.
Man, I think that was very well said, and it makes perfect sense. Let me ask you this, going back to Leslie's point earlier, a disclosure, would that be a good first start? Just saying, hey, I as an agent am going to use Ashley as a transaction coordinator or what have you. And she is licensed, but she's only allowed because she's in a different brokerage. Maybe there's a checkbox, same brokerage or something like that. I don't know what I'm visualizing here, but and saying, well, she's going to work over here, and if it's just clerical, it's okay. But here's how it's worked, Mr. or Mrs. Customer or client. This is how transaction coordinator works, and some of your information may be shared with this party that is not under the supervision of our brokerage. Is that something what you're kind of thinking, or?
I think that will work, but let me give you another example, if I may. I had another situation where on one of my VA properties, I worked with the agent and he was doing a great job. All correspondence was going to that agent. Everything was flowing well. And all of a sudden, I get a call and an email that says everything has to go through this person, right? Okay. But then they started asking for things like the master listing agreement. They started asking for documentation that, does that make sense?
Yes.
You can't have that. And why are you asking me for that? So a disclosure wouldn't protect me from getting sued from my clients for sharing confidential information to who is not signed up as part of the party. Because on this transaction, under the portal, this is the individuals that I have the right to talk to. Okay. And it's daunting to try to go back and forth with these brokerages to help them understand. I know you may be the asset manager, but I can't send you that document. I'm going to send it to the person that originated this contract. So it's a struggle when you get in it, trying to explain to that person that I protect my client and the information that I'm sharing with you, which my client is one person, but I also have to protect that veteran. I can't give you that information because you're not part of it, and I have to protect their NPI, their SPI, whatever, they're all of that information. So it really is a bigger problem than I think we realize when it comes to throwing that person into the middle of the transaction. And no oversight, no whatever. A disclosure, maybe if it comes from TREC and it's extremely specific and says, here's what happens if you don't follow it. But right now, there's just no rules around it.
Is there anything you can propose for that you think would be the best course of action?
Well, I think we have to just, decide in our state. We've already decided we're going to allow transaction coordination to happen. But I do think we, as brokers on the opposing side, should have the opportunity to say no. In this particular transaction, I cannot work with your transaction coordinator because of the confidentiality of this file. So I think we have to have some options here, you know.
I have an additional concern, in giving a disclosure to the consumer. I understand the ideology behind it, but I'm just wondering if that would just confuse them more than help them. Even though out of the goodness we're wanting to disclose, whether or not that confuses them, because from their perspective, the consumer's like, this is about how you run your business. I mean, I understand it's for the protection of the consumer, but this is a detail about how you run your business. Why do I need to know about this? Like, I'm just thinking higher level here. Why would a consumer want to know this? And is our explanation simple enough that they will understand? That's my concern. Is our explanation simple enough that it's going to understand it protects them? And I can't see simplicity. I don't see simplicity here with how it's, yeah.
Marvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but Marion, in the case that you described, did you represent the seller?
Yes.
Okay, and then the buyer's agent had a transaction coordinator, correct?
Yes.
And then that transaction coordinator asked for a copy of your listing agreement with your client, correct?
Right.
I would tell them one word. Actually, I'd tell them two words, but it would be no.
Yes. But again,
thank you.
There you go. I mean, I don't have to, you said it well.
Thank
Very
you.
nicely.
Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry. Well, maybe it was somewhat nice, but the other thing is that, Michael Mingdon can talk to us about vital information, which is social security number, driver's license, date of birth. In leasing and property management, that data is could get in the wrong hands. But in terms of listings and sales, we don't usually see date of birth, driver's license, social security number. Ashley, you've got hundreds of agents. Do you see any of that in your transactions?
No, we don't.
I see all of it.
Yeah. Mike, you get your hands full over there, buddy.
And too many people that just send it to me, and I'm going, no, you just quit sending me that stuff.
All right, so if we don't have an actual call to action or something that we need to do, I think a disclosure is a good idea, but maybe we put our thinking caps on. We put this particular topic on for the next agenda, because I think we've got some good discussion, but I don't think we have any plan of action here at this point. And I think that we need to put your thinking caps on and let's think a bit more about it and see if we can come to the table with something that needs to happen or what have you. But I do think,
for my clarification, the future agenda item is that, are we looking just at transaction coordination?
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 6.
Ty, sorry,
Yes,
excuse
ma'am.
me. Going back to Abby's question, I don't know that I would limit it to transaction coordination, because if you can only practice, if that's what we decide with your broker, then that applies to everything we've talked about today. Showing service,
Right.
all of that. So I don't know that
mean,
you should limit yourself on that agenda item.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I see what you mean. And a disclosure could cover everything on that whole gambit there. Well, then we'll leave it as is, leave it as it stands, and we'll just leave everything on there. Abby, it does make sense. All right, let's go to discussion item number 6, possible action regarding designated brokers. And it's basically, this was request, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna set this one up for you just a little.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, so both this agenda item and the next agenda item, so 6 and 7, are based on public comments we got at the last meeting. Agenda item 6, and that you requested to be on a future agenda item. And so agenda item 6, it is a conversation, I don't know if it's this iteration has had before, but I know broker responsibility has had before, about, I think the request is to limit, specifically to limit designated brokers to be able to be a designated broker for only 2 companies at most. So that's agenda item 6. Same deal. I know we're not on 7, but I'll just save you from having to do it again. Agenda item 7 is same. It was a comment from someone from the last meeting on a non-agenda item. The request was to add it to the agenda for this meeting.
And that the first one is basically talking about it's a term that they're using here. It's called a rent-a-broker, is what they're calling it. And essentially, if you've seen the comments or the email that was sent in, just talking about sponsoring multiple companies and hundreds of companies at one time. And this topic has come up several times in the past as staff just announced and talked about in the tenure that I've been here. That I know that Bob has been here, Leslie, Chance. I mean, a number of us. We've talked about this probably 3 or maybe 4 times. And quite frankly, there is just nothing in the books that we can limit, and this is the way it's come out, that we can limit how many sponsored companies that can be held by a designated broker. Now, what's responsible and what's being done are 2 different things. I don't know, we all have our own opinions about these things, but mathematics will give you the answer, and if you're spending 30 seconds on average a year with an agent, that's probably not oversight, so that there could be an issue. But I can tell you that the comment has come up multiple times, and there are tons of threads online about this very topic. And I can tell you they sent in a very good point on this, and just talking about how one broker can actually be good character and beholden to the clients and the brokerage as well as the agents. I don't, this is their comment. You can take a look at it. Does anybody have any comments or feedback on this at this point? I'm just giving you the feedback that since we've been through this before.
I think it comes down very simple to what is the definition of supervising agents? What is our definition of supervising agents? I think that the more clear we can get on that definition, then it would eliminate some of these issues.
Right. I think we all see that this is an issue, but addressing it and handling it may be a different, definitely a different bucket. Go ahead, Marvin. Yes, sir.
Maybe a topic for future discussion under item 9 is how do we handle intermediary with brokers who have multiple entities? So we can just discuss that in the future, but it somewhat relates to this topic.
That's a very good one. Intermediary between a broker that oversees multiple companies.
Another thought of mine is the more hands-off a broker is, the less in the loop they are. And I don't think it aligns with how we learn in real estate, right? You can be in this business 20 years and still learn something new in a transaction you did in your 20th year than you did in your first because of rule changes and everything else. So I wonder if there should be, part of this scenario is requiring that brokers close a certain number of transactions a year to stay in the loop on what's going on. I know that's, I don't know if it's something, it's because it's one thing to sit and advise agents, but if you really don't have a pulse of what's happening out there, there's nuances with insurance and nuances with all kinds of things that are coming up that weren't there 2 years ago. And for the broker to just be advising is to me a degree dangerous, because you don't have a pulse as to what's going on. And I think.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I wasn't trying to interrupt you.
Well, I'm just thinking that having, a lot of brokerages think that if the broker is doing transactions, that they are competing with their agents, but I think they're being better brokers by doing that, because they have a pulse on what's going on in the moment.
I think that that you have a valid point there. However, I do feel that the job of a broker is, if it's a supervising broker, is to supervise folks and to supervise the transaction itself. And I mean, Mike, I'm going to use you as an example. It's probably a bad example because I know you do everything anyway, but I'm going to use you in this scenario. But say Mike is supervising a handful of agents. He's getting his experience through the guidance and the support and the integration into those contracts and transactions with his agent. And that's where the supervisor piece comes in, right? So the mentorship, the supervisor piece, just because he's not physically doing the transaction himself, if he's a broker like myself and all of you are, you wouldn't be here. I'm sure that's the thing. We're all integrated into our systems, into our teams, into our brokerages. We learn from every single transaction, and we can apply that knowledge to the next one. Just because your name is not the sales agent on the transaction, you are the supervising broker. Therefore, I believe you're getting that experience along with the agent. That's just my thought process, but I do think that you have a good point there. All right. Any other comments on this email? And we appreciate the email. Honestly, this is good feedback.
He's got Bob's hand up.
Bob got his hand up? Bob?
Oh, you're muted, Bob.
Okay, good. So when we talk about our challenge, which Ty's right, we've talked about this for years, rent a broker and the whole challenge. The challenge is not so much that a broker is designated broker for multiple companies. The reality is we have very good brokers out there who are brokers for one company with a couple of thousand agents in it. So it really gets to the point of making sure the broker has the staff, the assistants, the whatever they need to make sure that these 2,000 agents are getting proper training and being supervised and going through the process. I think that it's hard for me to imagine that a broker in the rent-a-broker concept that's in the email with multiple companies out there could effectively have a management system in that. But there are business models out there where a broker has their regional people and they've got their people in different areas that can handle those couple of thousand agents as you work through it. On the concept of a broker needing to do production, and I understand while there's some benefit to that, frankly, I don't have time. As I address and manage my agents and go through the process and broker associates, if I had to take time out to do production, that'd be a problem. And I don't think it would, frankly, improve how I could supervise and work and train and work through my agents, although I see there's some value in if you're in the trenches and doing it. But what was brought up is also a problem. I said, well, I'm competing with my broker. That's not a good thing. So I think that's probably not the best thing, but somehow making sure that the broker who's got multiple companies or multiple whatever, because I mean, I have two, but one of them is a LIFRO, limited funding, so there's not anything involved there as opposed to the other one. But it's going to come down to a broker having the system in place to, in fact, be able to manage all their people. And this is going to come down in a track complaint. And we say, well, you know what? You've got a policy procedures manual, you've got classes, but you got 2,000 agents and you got loose cannons over here that somehow your people didn't pick up on. So what are you going to do to improve your system and take care of it? But that's going to be an ongoing challenge that we have to address and deal with it. So my thoughts on that.
Bob, that's very good points, and it does make sense. Brian, yes, sir.
Thank you. I totally 100% agree with Bob. I think the problem we're trying to solve is unsupervised agents, and we've addressed it. I mean, we've changed the rules that agents must be supervised on their first 3 transactions of each real estate type, and I think that's the way that we have solved the problem, and it's got to just be addressed through complaint issues. I don't know that we can dictate or change business models. All we can do is make sure that agents are supervised, and I think we've addressed it.
I think so too. All right, any other feedback on that? Let me look and see if anybody's got their hands up here. I apologize.
Mike's hands up.
Okay, perfect. So that's good news. And
Mike's got his hand up. Ty.
who does? Mike?
Amy?
Mike, go ahead, sir. I got you.
No,
I'm sorry
I agree with you. When I started my career, I did a lot of transactions. I mean, a lot of us do because that's part of the licensing, to get things going. And I've rep sellers, I've rep buyers, I've rep tenants, I've rep landlords, all that stuff. But I don't have the time to do that anymore either. I've got other people in the office for that now. But I do agree, we've got a problem. I don't see how I could handle 2,000 agents. I just don't see how that could handle that. I could effectively, as a broker, take care of that. Because I'm still very hands-on. I see every lease, I see every management agreement, I see every sales contract. And that's just the way I handle it for me. But again, I'm tiny. I've only got, like 4 agents. So these guys would have a whole lot more. I think I guess I have a question for Trek. Do you see very many complaints that come in for this type of issue where they're not being supervised, so I'm going to file a complaint, or that you can track to something about a broker not paying attention?
I don't know if Mike can speak anecdotally about that. What I will say, and I think several of you have already basically said this, but I think there are challenges with trying to sort of regulate this area. Many of you have mentioned, you can have a broker with 1,000 agents and that broker does it great. You can have a broker who is a designated broker for several entities and does it really well. You can have one broker who only has 1 or 2 sales agents and 1 or 2 maybe a designated broker for one and doesn't do it as well. I think from our perspective, it all comes down to broker responsibility. It doesn't matter if it's 1,000 agents or 1 agent or multiple designated or multiple entities or one. You are ultimately the broker responsible. And if a complaint is filed, enforcement is going to look at that issue. As to whether there's a lot of complaints about it, I don't know if Mike has any thoughts about that, but that's I think our general sentiment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would just, I agree with what Abby said in general. I mean, this has been an issue. I mean, it's improved over the time I've been here. I mean, the broker responsibility rule it really helped a lot. It's kind of given some more focus on it. The education that's improved over the past, 12 plus years I've been here. So, I mean, we just look at the cases that come in on a case by case basis. It depends. So, I've seen brokers do really well with thousands of agents, some maybe not so well. And, you're just going to have bad apples in any kind of industry. So weeding all those out is nearly impossible. Yeah.
Now, for some reason, Ty, we can't hear you anymore.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you go.
Okay. Any other comments or feedback as it pertains to this topic? All right. I do think that we all feel that that is it's important, and I think we've addressed a lot of it. So I think we'll move on to the next one. And again, I want to say thank you to folks for writing in on your public comment and giving us some good food for thought. All right, the next agenda item will be discussion and possible action regarding an age-based license exemption. And the suggestion is, did everyone take a look at the suggestion? But basically, essentially what they're talking about is they're a broker in both California and Texas. I just renewed my Texas license. I was about to renew my California when they told me I don't have to take CE to qualify. One has to be 70 years or older in good standing for a minimum of 30 years. All I would need to do is complete the whatever form, exemption request, and renewal fee along with the renewal application. Please pass this along to the powers that be. It is a great idea for Texas agents. I'm hoping it is in force by the time I have to renew my Texas license again. Jennifer. Well, good feedback, and it sure looks interesting. Has everyone reviewed this form, taken a look at it yet? If you're reviewing right now, that's fine, because it is pretty simple. If you look at the page 2 of the exemption form on there, it talks about the extension information for CE exemption, exemption conditions. And they are correct. California is saying that if you were in good standing for 30 years in this state and you're 70 years or older, that you're exempt, is what it's saying. I do have some other information, but any thought process on this at this point? Any feedback? Mike, go ahead, and then we'll go on to the next. You're muted.
Okay,
sir.
just for background, I got my broker's license in 1980. Back then, you didn't even have to be a salesman. I took my college degree and sat for the broker's test and then became a broker. So I've been a broker for 45 years. My license gets renewed my license expires at the end of March. I'm going to turn 70 in June. Damn, missed it just by a little bit. But I think it's nuts. Personally, I think this is crazy. But look at what we're talking about now, and this is just in the last legislative session. How many brokers think that they can just ignore all of this stuff and still be a viable broker and still work on stuff? I think it's, Leslie's the best of all of us of saying protect the consumer, protect the consumer. I mean, I think it's crazy to say I don't now. I don't have a problem with doing like what the realtors do and don't make me pay dues anymore, but that might be one thing. But if we want to talk about something like that as a reward for being a long-term broker, but I think we've got to have this education. I think it's crazy not to. So that's just my 2 cents.
Well, I appreciate your 2 cents. I think it makes a lot of sense, actually. That's what it does. Go ahead, Marvin.
Well, Mike, you could just move to California, maybe out there and do that, So this reminds me of the old exemption that we used to have in Texas, and Bob will remember this. There were certain brokers in small population counties that were excluded from or exempted from the requirement of CE or MCE back at that time. But yeah, I agree with Mike with all the changes that are happening in the business these days. I think education is incredibly important. I respect the suggestion, but I think in terms of protecting the consumer, we need to continue with CE moving forward for everyone.
And Marvin, to second what you're saying, our conversation throughout the entire meeting today has been over education and making sure folks know what they're doing, how to handle the newest changes in real estate licensing code and the requirements. I agree with both of you.
And really, in our company, the interesting thing is the agents in our company who have been in the business 3 or 4 years are actually doing better with all of these changes than the people who've been in the business for 20 years, because it's different. So I think education is important. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Marvin,
Thank you.
no, it's a good point, but I know, Marvin, you've heard this call, you've had this call before, especially probably when you first got into business, when you call someone to make an offer and they say, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. That's one of my favorite things. And then what I used to tell them is, well, ma'am, you've been doing this for 20 years the wrong way.
Very funny. Very funny.
So, let's get it together. But all I can say is education is key. It's something no one can ever take away from you, and it is valuable to every person, especially in this room. Brian, you had a comment, sir.
Honestly, I have nothing to add. I agree wholeheartedly that we need to continue to take education and require it.
Well, I wasn't too concerned, knowing our great group of minds here. I wasn't too concerned about this going much further, but I do have a stack of other information that I could share, but I don't think it's needed. So we're just gonna, if anybody wants to do anything about this or say anything, we can. If anybody's in favor of making these exemptions happen, let's have a discussion about it. But if not, I think we move forward. I don't think anyone's raising their hand, so we'll just conclude that discussion. And again, thank you for the feedback. I think her name was Jennifer. We really appreciate you putting that out there, and it's a pleasure being around people who've been in the business for 30 years. So thank you so much. All right, let's see here. Let's go to item number 8, discussion and possible action regarding teams and team leads. Now, we did discuss this a bit the last meeting, and I think it's really important because this keeps coming up for us, and it's just very, very confusing. I've heard different ideas throughout the years and things of this nature, and I know we've got this new system, Realm, that's coming up, and it's going to be fully functioning on all cylinders soon, and I'm excited about it. But the main thing that I'm hearing, and I'm just bringing this up, and I know that we've had this discussion before, so I know that I'm in good company here, but I can't figure out who the actual team lead is unless I have an actual viable contract or offer that's perfectly filled out. There's no way for me to identify who the actual team lead is, who's in charge of the team besides the broker, and then who's associated with that actual team. So how do we determine when people move on and when people move off that team, if they're in compliance, if they're not in compliance? How does that work? How do we tie that into, how do we tie it in and we verify that we know who's doing what and what base they're on, essentially? That's the determination. And should it be updated on, should there be a team name added? We did have this discussion. Should there be a team name added to an IBS? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe, throw it out there. Should it just be on the contract like it is now? Should there be something else added there? I don't know, but the fact is that the identification piece seems to be where I am personally running into this issue. Throwing it out there for comments. Leslie?
So I think there's a couple different ways that this could happen. I think that if you are going to represent your client, it is in your name, not your team lead's name. So on the broker information page, where it says associate's name, it can't be the team lead's name. It's the actual person that has worked with that client. And if there needs to be a team lead name, it could be under that. I mean, I could care less, really, but some other people may care about a team name. I would rather see a person's name than a team name. So if you had the associate's name and the team lead's name, I think that would work, but also there could be a rule of there's one person within that organization that is going to be quote unquote responsible other than the sponsoring broker, and that is the person working with them.
For sure.
So even in the MLS, it should go under the person that worked with them. That's the only way we're going to figure out. Have you been trained? Have you done your three listings, your 3 sales, everything that we have to do these days to meet our requirements?
So Leslie, what you're saying is a lot of the structures right now are where, say, I'm going to use Brian for a good example. Brian's my team lead. He goes out and he says, hey, I got a lead for you. Ty, go out and get this deal. I go meet up with the client. We sign a listing agreement or a buyer representation agreement. We get under contract. The contract then shifts to where that information goes underneath Brian's name instead of my name, even though I did the entire transaction. Because Brian's the team lead, it goes underneath his name, and then I'm nowhere to be found, even though I was the one who did everything.
Correct. And if something happens later or whatever, the only thing you have back to refer to is that contract that doesn't even say the actual agent's name.
Got it. Makes sense. And that's kind of where I've seen some issues. And now Bob had his hand up.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
One of the challenges in dealing with this, I'm not entirely sure I care about who the team lead is. I care about, back to the thing Leslie pointed out several times, the concept with BRAC, the consumer needs to know, if I've got a problem with this agent, who's responsible? And we deal with that via IABS form. You can do that on page 10 of the contract. We have certain information, but we're getting into how different teams operate. Some teams require the lead agent, the team lead, to be on all the contracts so that they have the statistics, so they have the credit. Some of them say the agent can do it. Our E&O insurance looks at page 10 and says, when there's a dispute here, who was the one who was providing this professional service for the consumer? And our E&O insurance looks at that. And if this person who a complaint was filed or a lawsuit was filed is nowhere in there, that could be a problem with their E&O insurance. So we're getting into the weeds when we look at all of this. And I think it comes down to making sure we've got a system so that whoever the lead agent is, as it go, make sure it's set up so that if a consumer has a problem, they know who to go to. And the reality is, when we get a lawsuit, knock on wood, in our office, we look at the names of the people that are going to show up, which is different than when we have a BRAC complaint. In the BRAC complaint, there's a whole different hierarchy of people who show up on a BRAC complaint. The broker, maybe the agent, but in a lawsuit, everybody in the room shows up. So we look at how this works out, but the lead agent on the team, how the team is set up, we just need to make sure the team set it up in such a way that consumers, it's very user-friendly to consumers. So if they've got a problem, they know who's responsible. But when we get a BRAC complaint, that lead agent on the team is not going to show up anywhere on that BRAC complaint unless they happen to be the agent involved in the situation. And correct me, Abby and Mike, if I'm wrong on that, but that's been my experience, unfortunately. So I think as long as the consumer is taken care of, I don't frankly care who the lead agent is.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Bob, so 2 points. So you're right, the delegated supervisor isn't added to a complaint the same way as sponsoring broker is, unless that delegated supervisor is somehow involved. And the reason I'm talking about delegated supervisors is because under our rules, if you're a team lead, you have to be a delegated supervisor. I would also say, to your point, Bob, that is a function of the IBS as well. You've got that contact information at the bottom, which includes a licensed supervisor for exactly that purpose, so that consumers are able to find the person to talk to in the event there is an issue.
Marion, you had your hand up? I didn't forget about you, trust me.
Yeah, I pulled it down.
I know you were hoping I'd forget about you. I didn't.
I guess mine is more of a pet peeve and Bob, the reason I pulled it down because he did an excellent job of explaining it. But the problem is again, and Leslie said it beautifully, you get the call after you get the contract under contract. You don't get something at the beginning of the contract that says, hey guys, I'm writing this offer and here's all my team members. We execute the contract and then we get a phone call that says, by the way, we need you to change everything that you've been doing. And we need you to fix it how we want it to be done. And I know because I had one situation where I was like, I'm not doing that. I mean, I never spoke to you. And to me, that's a real issue because I need to know who to go back to if and when there's a potential lawsuit. And if it's that easy to just take my name off of a contract, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to remove my name off of every problem transaction I've ever done and put someone else's name on it. And I guess that's where I have the problem with them being able to just change it at will. Even if it's their business practice, that's their business practice. That's not our business practice. Our business practice is 100% transparency for the consumer and 100% transparency for the brokerage. Okay, so I was trying not to talk, but Ty, you made me.
No, you did great. Thanks for that. That was very eloquent. Thank you. Mike, Leslie.
I want to go back to what Abby says because I don't think it's actually what we're talking about. Yes, they are producing the IABS, but it doesn't include the name of the person that actually worked with the client. And it doesn't matter about who the supervisor is as much as people need to know who worked with that client. So if Ty and I were on a team together and I did all the work with that client, but Ty's name was on that contract as the associate, which he wasn't, and if it's his IABS and he didn't really work with that client, that's not right. Because I would be the one that should be liable for whatever went wrong versus Ty.
Well, and I do want to caution us a little bit about talking about, civil liability. That's not something we can really consider here. But, Commissioner Lerner, to your point, trying to think about, how is this affecting or impacting the consumer? If the consumer is working with someone, they're working with them, they do have that information. So it sounds almost like what we're talking about here is frustrations maybe with the agents not knowing exactly who to contact. Is that more?
No, this is greatly affecting the consumer. Say it's a year down the road and they're like, oh my gosh, what did this agent do? Well, that agent's name is nowhere on the contract, not on the IABS. I sometimes look too going, how long has this agent been in the business? They don't know what they're doing and whatever. And I'm like, well, they have to have a minimum of 3 things that they're coached for. How do I know they have it? Because there's not any sales under their name. And then this has definitely happened to me. I'm like, I'm sorry, but this isn't how you do it. You really need to go get training. Well, I've been here however long and I've done this amount of transactions. Well, there is nothing showing that amount of transactions under that agent's name. So yes, that does affect the consumer.
So I think those are all valid points. And Mike has a comment.
I'm gonna say the same type of thing. I just went into the Trek website, and I know there's issues going on right now, so it may be a little off of what I tried to do. But I went into a couple of brokerages that I know the broker, and you got all these team names, and sometimes I see a brokerage and it's got 8 agents listed and 34 team names. But I go in and I click on a team name, and it doesn't show me who the team members are even that are on that team. So I don't know who the team members are. And I don't know if that's something that's being done, fixed with Realm, or if it's a Because you know what Leslie said, how do you know who is actually working on that contract?
And
So-
Mike, that was my point to this, is that really the association, we talked about quite some time now back, we talked about associated brokers.
Yeah.
This is all in the same genre,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. So no,
Also,
I
with
agree.
those team names, you can upload any team name and it's never checked and it's not deleted when the team goes away. It all just stays there. I mean, it's just there to be there.
Well, I see a lot of advertising too, where I can tell you for a fact the team name is way bigger than the broker name. And I know
For
that's
sure.
supposed to be against the rules, but I see that a lot. So
We have an advertising compliance program that you can report that to.
yeah, because I've done it a couple of
Right.
in the past, not lately, but yeah, you see that you go what brokers are they even associated with because the team name is so big. So
That's basically what I've got here. Any other feedback? I think it boils down to the association is all it really boils down to.
yeah.
Do we feel like and I guess this is a question for staff, do we think this will be addressable in realm or not?
So I can start this conversation. So we don't have anything currently built in Realm that connects teams to certain individuals beyond the broker, because under our rules, the way we regulate teams and under our statute, the way we regulate teams is through advertising. And so that's where that team component comes in, is through advertising, in the advertising rule. And it's an obligation of the broker to submit that, register that name when they start using, and then and we've talked about this, I know, in the past, but also to let us know when they stop using that name. There isn't a process to collect the individuals, associated with that broker, because again, under our rules, associated with that team, because under our rules, it's an advertising aspect. So that's not something we currently have or have planned to build. I'll let anyone else chime in too.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Leslie?
I think it's much bigger than just tying into Realm, because that team member can come and go as they please. And the consumer will still never know who that person was that worked with them, because it's still not on the contract and it's still not on the IABS. So I think it's more so making sure that the actual associate that did all the work, wrote the contract, did all of that for the client, needs to be on the contract, not the team lead's name.
Question with regard to that, because in adding the broker, the team leader to have to take the broker responsibility course and being held to the same level as a broker, I think it addresses, it protects the consumer in that regard. So no matter which, that team leader is always there, right? And their team members are going to come and go. But the person that's ultimately responsible is that team leader.
The person ultimately responsible is a sponsoring broker.
Ultimately, correct.
So, but the point of the matter is the consumer, if they go back to that contract and they want to know who they work with, it wasn't that team lead. The team lead had no hands on that contract. So unless you're the one working the contract and you're responsible for that contract and that client, then your name should not be, your name could be on there as a team lead, but the actual person working with that client's name should be on that contract and on that transaction.
But isn't that client working with that agent directly? Don't they know who they're working with?
What happens when you're a year down the road and there's a complaint or something else?
Well, I think if it comes down to complaints and you're getting attorneys involved, then you get a subpoena for that information, and that'll get it to you.
Our job from day one of a transaction is to protect the consumer. I don't see how not putting the actual agent's name isn't helpful to that consumer. And also it's helpful to track when monitoring, are these people really trained or not? Because then you can actually see the activity they've had, because we don't have any paperwork that says, oh yes, they did this transaction and signed off on. Everything is by the honor system. So unless we have that data, there's no way to check.
So that's the broker. I know with brokers, they have procedures in onboarding and offboarding team members, and they have records of all that. But is it the responsibility of TREC to keep track of that for the consumer? Or is it the broker's responsibility?
Nobody's asking TREC to keep track of anything. We're asking for the name to be put on the contract to show who actually worked with that client. And yes, some brokers do know what their agents are doing, but many do not.
So I'll just add, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, these are valid points, and I understand the concept of protecting the consumer. And to Leslie's point, something happens down the road and they have to go back and look at their paperwork. I don't think we can fix that. We're getting into how teams run their team and how they have information. I mean, you have information on page 10 of the 1 to 4 that has a place for a team name. So you could have that in there, name of the agent, those kinds of things. I think if we stay with the fact that once we accept, we're being tracked, years ago accepted teams and understood the problem with teams. Our former AE, Douglas O. Mixon, hated teams. He said, you know what? They don't understand who's responsible for what. And that's the problem we got now. Who's responsible? Well, it's the broker. It's the sponsoring broker. And they've got to make sure that there's some transparency there, that when people work with agents on a team, that everybody understands who's doing what and who's their responsibility. I'm concerned that we're getting into how we make teams do the business and what we have on page 10, how we have in the IBS form. I don't think that'll fix it. As long as we have transparency to the point, right, 3 years and 10 months later, right before the 4-year track deadline, they want to file a complaint. Start looking at the paperwork. I don't think it's going to all relate and roll back to Leslie's point. They look at all the paperwork to see who they were working with. They should have information on who they were working with, regardless of what's on page 10, regardless of what's in the IABS. There should be that information. Otherwise, I don't think our documentations can fix that particular problem, or should. I think as long as we can make sure the broker understands to train their teams, that who's responsible and what they have to do to make sure the consumer knows what's going on, then I think we're good with that. Otherwise, we'll start telling teams how to do the business. And I don't think we can go down that road. It's a slippery slope that never ends. Just my thoughts.
Thank you, Bob. Any other comments on teams and team leads? Feedback? All right, I don't know as far as this topic goes, but I do think it needs to be something we think on and we look at, and we possibly will need to move this to another meeting in the future. If you know, we can talk about that later. But as far as that topic goes now, I don't think there's anything else to talk about.
So I think
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no.
I think my recommendation would be, if you do want to continue the conversation, is to come forward with recommended changes, right? Because I think you can talk about the issues, but nothing is going to move like a recommendation from the whole team. That's a bad word. The whole committee would need to vote on a recommendation, which would then go to the commission. And so I think, you've done the important work here today of like talking through what people are seeing as the issues, what people are seeing as not being I think we've heard a lot of points and counterpoints, which is great. So I think to the extent you want to carry on the conversation, it's probably time to center that conversation on a recommendation. So that would just be my suggestion in order to move things forward. So if you do put it on a future agenda item, maybe everybody comes with, or to the extent anybody has a recommendation, not everybody might have a recommendation to come with that.
That's essentially what I would like to see happen myself. I think, we all know what the issue is. We just got to figure out a way to address it. And I don't know that there's any other, besides having something actionable to do or put in place. I don't really know what else we can talk about here on this one. So we can talk about adding this to a future agenda item for the next one, and we put our thinking caps on and maybe come with a couple of ideas on how we would address it, and then we can discuss those ideas. If you feel like that's a great idea, everyone, team, if you think it's a great idea, then we can do that. What I don't want to do is I don't want to keep adding it if it's, if you don't think there's a solution. Now, I'm sure there is a solution, but, we've got to put our minds to it. Would you like for me to do that, Brian?
Oh, you're muted, Brian.
You're muted. You're muted, bud.
I would say we could add it if we specifically identify what are the problems we're trying to solve, rather than a broad discussion about teams and team leads. So what specific problems are we trying to solve? And then I think that guides our discussion.
Mm-hmm. I think it just boils down to disclosure and to identification. I think that's all it is. It's
Transparency.
transparency, yeah. Ashley.
Oh, I was just going to also add, and whether or not consumers are harmed. I heard what Leslie said and understand the frustration that she has, because we have it too. And I will say, as a brokerage that has teams, it is something that we work hard on to make sure that our agents are transparent whenever they're engaging, and that you can go on our website and see our teams and who the team leads are and which office they're in. And we try to make sure that it's transparent, but I'm not sure that there's harm to the consumer.
Brian, did you mean to have your hand up again, or? Okay, perfect. Any other feedback right now as it stands?
Like maybe Marvin?
Marvin?
Oh, it looks like he may have some issues with audio.
Okay, let's go to Mike. We'll go to Mike real quick. Mike's on my screen here, so we'll go to Mike, and then I'll look and see who else has got their hand up here.
I don't have teams in my office, so I'm speaking a little bit from outside. But going back to a little bit of what Leslie was saying, if you go, we've got the Bob Baker team, and oh my God, I've looked up Bob. He's a great agent, broker. He's got all this ability, and he's doing everything. And then you never find out that he's the team lead, but he never even worked on your contract. You didn't get Bob. You got his team. And so is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know the answer because I don't have teams, but that's the thing I'm thinking of is in that aspect, do we need to identify more who actually is learning, who actually is on that team that's doing the work, and whether or not the public has been harmed by not knowing that.
Good points, Mike. Marvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the question. I would agree with the question. Is the consumer harmed? I think we need to answer that question. The other thing is, I really like driving things to the broker. We talk about broker responsibility, all of those things, both from the broker, him or herself, also from the consumer perspective. And if we drive this to the broker through the IBS process, they're going to have plenty of information there. And yes, I understand it might be someone else opened a door, someone else wrote the offer, someone else negotiated repairs, but ultimately this all goes to the broker. Broker is ultimately responsible. And I'm okay not further complicating things.
Mm-hmm. All right, so with that being said, I think that we can look at this for a future agenda, but we do need to have something actionable on it. So let's table it for now. If somebody comes up with something that makes perfect sense and is actionable, and that maybe something we could discuss that would address this and how we could implement it, that would be greatly appreciated. So we'll wrap that discussion up. And let's move on to the next one, would be discussion and possible action regarding future meeting topics, based on anything we haven't even covered today or anything we have covered, we've already addressed it. We'd like to add it to the agenda for the next meeting anyway. But is there anything else you'd like to add to a future meeting topic or to the next meeting that we haven't discussed? Marvin? Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So a curiosity question in relation to a designated broker who is the designated broker of more than one entity, sort of relating back to a previous discussion. But for example, here in our market, we have a nice, strong, healthy, wonderful, reputable broker. It's a broker, it's an overall corporation that operates 3 separate entities. One person is the designated broker of all 3 of those entities. When an agent at entity 1 does a transaction with an agent from entity 2, that specific company, who does a great job, in my opinion, uses and approaches that as an intermediary transaction. Even though it's completely separate branding, completely separate designated supervisors, et cetera, delegated supervisors, but they approach it as intermediary. The advantage here is that the consumer, if there's need for clarity, need for conversation, need for some critical scenarios here, that consumer eventually can talk to the broker who represents them. The consumer on the other side also understands that the broker is the same person. There's clarity, there's transparency with that. However, my concern is that that is not the case. There are a lot of other scenarios where one broker is the designated broker for 3, 5, 30, or 40 entities. Their agents are doing transactions and they are not being identified as an intermediary. So I'm curious if we have a clear approach to this with the agency, or if we need to provide that, or if that's just an education point. Just curious about the need for that.
Well, I can answer your question as to that interpretation. But as to whether you want a future agenda item, that will certainly be for the committee to discuss or decide. So the language of the statute and how that's being interpreted is that a designated, so you've got business entity brokers, and there is a recognition of that broker. So that is seen in ways as a separate entity, because it is. So it wouldn't matter in like the scenario you were just going through. It wouldn't matter if there is the same designated broker on multiple entities. If one entity had the sell side, one entity had the buy side, that would not trigger intermediary, even if the designated brokers are the same, because the actual entity or the listing broker in this case is ABC LLC. The listing broker, the buyer broker in the other case is 123 LLC. So there's a recognition of that entity as the broker, despite the fact that there might be the same designated broker.
Thank you for that. I would like to maybe consider that for future discussion, Mr. Chair.
Marvin, that is an excellent topic for a future agenda item. And I think it's very thought provoking and definitely warrants discussion if everyone else agrees. Does anybody disagree with adding this to a future agenda item? Okay, let's add this to a future agenda item. The discussion of intermediary, possibility of it being an intermediary transaction for a broker that owns multiple entities. Hey, Bob, you got one, sir?
To this point, and I heard a little bit of what I think was that Abby who was kind of discussing that with us. Doesn't this get into the legal issue of intermediary and brokers and who's responsible and that kind of thing? Will we get some really valuable input, I think, from Track Legal on how this really works to make sure we're on the right page here?
Yes, we can certainly provide you some information.
Okay, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bob. Leslie.
I would like to discuss being inactive in perpetuity and just a small amount of CE having to be done.
Inactive?
Mm-hmm.
Inactive license. And you could just state inactive for as long as you want, essentially?
Yes, with a small amount of CE to come back.
Okay, so if you're, we can just put that as inactive, discussion on inactive license, the length of the time that you can hold an inactive license and the CE that would be required for that license in perpetuity. That's a good topic too. There's a lot of inactive licenses, especially right now. All right. That's a good one. Any others out there that you've got? Here, let me flip through. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone. I don't see anything. I think those are really good points and really good topics for our next meeting. If something else in the meantime comes up, please let us know. But I think those are some very good discussion points so far. Staff, do you have anything else to add or anything you need for those right now?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Right now.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. Let's go ahead and discuss possible action regarding future meeting dates. Wednesday, April the 8th is our next one. Wednesday, April the 8th at 10 a.m. We could come up with an alternate time if that doesn't work for somebody. But as of right now, I believe that's after spring break and looks like a pretty good time. Anybody have any conflicts there? Raise your hand, please. Thank you. Okay, so let's stick with that date and time. Wednesday, July 8th. That's the week of the holiday. Now that one I could see being an issue. Anybody have any issues with July the 8th? No? All right. Let's stick with July the 8th. And then the next one would be October 14th, 2026, 10 a.m. Now that's far into the future. Mike, you've got a conflict there?
Yeah, I've got a conference in Vegas that week, but considering it's Vegas, that means it's earlier than that for me in Vegas. So I'm probably clear. So I'm probably good. So
all right.
if I've gone to bed yet.
Yeah.
What was that date again,
Mike?
Ty?
It is October 14th, 2026 at 10 a.m.
I have a conflict that day. I'm strategic planning for my company.
Got it. That's a good one. So we have two conflicts that day. Do we have an alternate date at this point?
We don't have an alternate date suggested.
What about the
Would say
13th?
the 15th, maybe?
13th. I have got a conflict on the 15th.
I have a
Okay.
conflict that day still. Could we move it either up a week or back a week?
Sure. If that's okay with staff, we could look at maybe on a Tuesday of, I don't know what date that is.
This is usually the time where I give Amber enough time to urgently message me to say we can't do it on some particular day, which I haven't gotten that message yet. But you're
Got it.
thinking the 7th or the 6th or 7th? Is that what I was hearing?
Maybe the
Yes.
7th.
Actually, the 7th would work better for me, I believe.
7th is great.
7th is perfect.
7th. If that works for staff, that works for us.
Yes, I think it does.
Anybody got a
So-
conflict?
Does anybody else have a conflict here? I'm looking. Nope, I don't see anybody raising their hand, so I think we should be good unless staff has an issue on it. I think we're good to go on that one. So Wednesday, October 7th, we'll amend that date to Tuesday, October 7th. Was that a
Wednesday.
Tuesday?
It's
Wednesday, October 7th, 2026 at 10 a.m. Will be the new date unless there's an issue, and then we can just modify it if something does come up in the near future. We've got plenty of time to fix it. All right, without further ado, I want to say thank you, Happy New Year, and it was a great meeting today, and I truly appreciate everyone being on today and sharing your feedback and all the public comments as well. I hope you have a great start of your year, and let's make it a good one. I'll see you in just a few months.
Great job,
Take care.
Guy. Good job.
Thank
Good one. Good
There you
meeting.
go.
See you guys later.